Good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 13th Joint Animal Service Commission. Michael Althauser has been excused from tonight, and Sarah DeVille, Carolina Mejes, assistant, is going to be sitting in for her. Cynthia, can you introduce our other guest?
Yes, so I'm Cynthia Pratt from the City of Lacey, and Malcolm Miller, council member Malcolm Miller, is going to cover for me at least for a half an hour while I'm at another meeting. And so I'm sure he'll love this committee. It's great. So I'm going to close out now and go to my other meeting, but I will be back about 6:15-ish, maybe.
Okay. Sarah, would you like to share your screen so we can get the agenda?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what I would like to start off with is an approval of the agenda. Seeking a motion for that, if possible.
Move that we approve the agenda as posted.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Good. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. How about an approval of the consent agenda, which includes our meeting minutes and the shelter statistics for August 2021?
I'll go. I'll move that we approve the consent agenda for August 2021 and shelter statistics.
I'll second, but I have questions about the statistics.
Okay. Yeah, I was just about to ask for edits or amendments. It's perfect. Go for it.
Well, I went through it today to see what was going on so I could add to my big long table. And I'm missing a month. July, I think, didn't get sent to us. And so I'm missing that one. I have a question about when you give the total number of euthanasias, does that owner request euthanasias or does it not? Because that makes a big difference. There's 14 to 18 of those. And then lastly, when you go to the second page of the 1 year one, the headers talk about May 22 and May 21 instead of August 21 and 20. So the headers on as you work your way down on the one for just 1 month at that page, you got bad headers on there. There needs to be some editing to make it so that it's got the right dates.
Good catch. Thank you. And I will make sure to include, I can forward July's numbers as well. And yes, the total euthanasia does include owner surrenders as owner requested euthanasia as well. That's the full total of euthanasias that were performed at the shelter.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep.
That's what I assumed, but I wasn't certain.
So I think to do this Robert's rules correctly, we do need to do an amendment to the consent agenda, particularly the shelter statistics. Vote on that, and then we come back and vote on the amended consent agenda. So Doug, why don't you motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the stipulation that the approval of the shelter statistics includes my three comments about editing, the number of euthanasias, and getting the July 2021 set.
Okay. So we're just voting on the amendment to the consent agenda. We're going to come back and do the full vote. So is there a second on that amendment to our consent agenda?
I will second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment to the consent agenda, please. Aye.
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 Okay. Now I'm seeking a vote on the approval of the amended consent agenda which alters the information in the shelter statistic and provides July's statistics. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, so consent agenda is passed. Are we going to have the man behind the curtain help us with public comment, Sarah?
Yes. If anybody would like to give public comment at this time, please signal by raising your hand. You should find that at the bottom of the screen. If you are on the phone, I believe it is *6 to give public comment via the phone. Does not look like we have anybody raising their hand at this time. So I believe move forward.
Okay, we're going to close the public comment. Can you share your screen again with the agenda? That'd be fabulous. Thank you. All right. I just wanted to move on to a JASCOM update and read a prepared statement that we had put together. And this does come from me as the chair of Joint Animal Service Commission. And this is in response to some comments and emails that we have been getting. So here's the statement. Over the past few months, several statements were made on social media, email, and possibly in public comment regarding Executive Director Sarah Hawk and her management of Joint Animal Services. As the chair of Joint Animal Service Commission, I want to make it abundantly clear I'm absolutely confident in Ms. Hawk's ability to continue to lead the Joint Animal Services. To date, during her 2-year tenure as Executive Director, Ms. Hawk has successfully led a number of significant operational endeavors and policy changes, including but not limited to modernization of the Animal Service computer, software, and communication infrastructure, launching a new online pet licensing portal, updating adoption and night drop procedures to align with industry standard of care, pursuing and achieving grant funding for medical suite and a well-documented gap in shelter operations, enhancing training for staff, implementing a culture of life-saving in the operations of the shelter, strategically planning for future joint animal services, and impressively, Ms. Hawk has done most of this while navigating organization through the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. As stated earlier, I unequivocally support Ms. Hawk, and I look forward to her continued leadership and management of the Joint Animal Services. I know Ms. Hawk is staunchly committed to the vision and mission of Joint Animal Services, and as a result, people and animals in Thurston County will continue to experience and benefit from the enhanced animal-related services. And I just want to say on a more personal note, when I read that statement, I 100% agreed with it. The work that's been done by Sarah for the animal services, for our county, for the animals is phenomenal. I feel like our shelter is going to be up to standard of care, and that is from a veterinarian's perspective and a city council member from Olympia, because all of our jurisdictions put assessments in to help run the animal services. So I want to be very personal about this. Sarah Hawk has it. She's got this. We are going to go into the future and make a phenomenal animal service out of an already good one. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right. I'm going to move on to staff presentations, which is your shelter operational overview.
It is. So again, I wanted to go over tonight some questions or concerns that have been brought up by the public for some operational changes and updates that we have been making. Oop. And of course, I say this and my screen isn't working. So hold on one sec while I reshare. Is it gonna do it? There we go. Yay. So as a reminder of how Joint Animal Services is funded. So Joint Animal Services receives revenue from a variety of sources, not included to license sales, adoption fees, donations, and annual jurisdiction assessments for services. Each governing body of the cities of Tumwater, Olympia, and Lacey and Thurston County approve assessment funding levels annually. Animal protection and control activities, so what we would call animal control or field services, is funded on a per capita basis for the cities. However, since 2003, Thurston County contracted with Joint Animal Services for a modified or reduced field services within unincorporated Thurston County. Thurston County is, however, exploring moving back to full services in 2022. So Joint Animal Services staffing levels have remained the same in the past 2 years, including our animal control officers. Jazz is currently recruiting for a couple of vacant positions, but these vacancies occurred due to internal promotions. Maintaining continuity of services is critical to Jazz to achieving his mission and vision in the community. Veterinary care. So Jazz partners with local veterinary clinics to care for the animals that enter the shelter. We also contract with relief veterinarians to come into the shelter to provide medical care in-house as well. But in 2019, we had 2 different assessments done for the shelter, one by the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or the ASPCA, and the other one was done by UC Davis Corrett Shelter Medicine Program in California. And both, when completed the operational assessments, noted that our largest bottleneck to moving animals through the shelter was the lack of medical care internally. This creates a massive bottleneck and keeps animals within the shelter longer than necessary. And when animals are in the shelter longer than necessary, it creates undue stress and can actually cause animals to become ill, and again, perpetuating the cycle. So it was noted that in order to alleviate this bottleneck, that Joint Animal Services consider bringing medical services in-house. So that is when, following those recommendations, we moved forward to begin the creation and implementation of a medical treatment and surgical suite in-house to accommodate that happening. And it was very evident that it was needed, especially during COVID, when the pandemic increased services for the public in the veterinary field, but ended up backlogging animals at the shelter because veterinary care became so important during the pandemic. We solicited for funding following those assessments, and the ASPCA, backing their assessment and really believing in those improvements. We were also awarded a grant through their Northern Tier Shelter Initiative to help provide all the medical and surgical equipment for the suite. We are anticipating that the medical suite will be completed and operational by the end of 2021. We will continue to work with local veterinary clinics as well as contract with veterinarians internally to provide the best level of veterinary medicine we can for the shelter animals. There have been concerns over us closing what we call the night drop. The night drop, or also known as drop boxes, it violates basic standards of care according to the Association of Shelter Veterinarians, as well as outlined in the guidelines of standards of care for animal shelters. The reason for this is the level of stress animals endure being housed overnight in those kennels. In most cases, animals being put in those kennels are not being cared for appropriately because there's no one there. And what ends up happening is we have sick or injured animals being put in the night drop in the middle of the night. And by the time we get to them in the morning, they are critical, if not already deceased, from that lack of medical care because they were put in the middle of the night. So by closing the night drop kennels, we are securing animal safety and well-being, especially when we have veterinary hospitals, emergency hospitals, open at night to take those animals in. One of the other concerns is when you have the night drops or drop boxes, it also doesn't allow for conversation with the finder or owner to what is going on, so that the animals can receive the best care possible. And so notably, we are not the only shelter who has closed our night drop. And point in fact, we are one of the last ones to do so on the Puget Sound. We continue to do investigations and have never stopped. There have been slight delays as far as prosecution of investigations due to the pandemic. But as you can see from statistics, we have not decreased our level of service over the last several years. And in fact, we're targeted to, again, hit our average, if not exceed those numbers by the end of the year. Our adoption protocols. We have made some changes to our adoption protocols in the fact that we follow guidelines called Adopters Welcome. And in this philosophy of Adopters Welcome, we have conversations with adopters. It's called conversation-based adoption counseling. And so rather than an adopter just filling out a form, we have conversations with our adopters about what they are looking for and the needs of the animals in the shelter. And we do our best to make that match. Now, there's always some worries with Adopters Welcome that you are going to have unsuccessful adoptions because you don't have all of these adoption requirements set forth to prevent things like returns from happening. But open adoptions or Adopters Welcomes studies have shown that this does not increase returns or abuse cases. Point in fact, what ends up happening is adopters feel more welcome to come to a shelter. One of the main reasons why adopters do not adopt at a shelter is they don't feel like they are welcome. They feel like they are being judged on whether or not they are being a good pet owner. And so this process aligns with what is supported by national organizations, as well as a best practice for animal shelters. There has been some questions about our testing for certain viruses within the shelter. So I do want to make it clear that we do test for parvo, FIV, and FELV if animals are symptomatic or they come from an area where there is documented increases of those illnesses. For parvo testing so a little bit of clarity. Most people feel that testing for parvo for all dogs upon entry is the best way to prevent disease, and that is just not the case. Testing every animal when they enter a shelter, it does not prevent or eliminate parvos in shelters. Routine parvo testing in healthy appearing dogs or puppies is expensive, and it's also an ineffective method for controlling parvovirus. Animals that initially test negative and then could begin shedding hours or even days later. And this type of testing can also result in increased rate of false positives. And it also gives a feeling of false security when you're testing like this. The best prevention for parvovirus within a shelter is vaccinating upon intake. A study performed by University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Veterinary Medicine also found that in general, testing should be reserved for symptomatic dogs or dogs that were recently exposed or potentially high risk. So since viral shedding may occur days before becoming symptomatic, it can be helpful to test very high risk puppies, for example, if they are not symptomatic, but perhaps are showing other concerning signs, example, weak, maybe not eating. There could have been a litter mate that has passed for unknown reasons, and perhaps came from an area that is known for parvo outbreaks within the community. However, routine testing for parvo in healthy appearing dogs or puppies is very ineffective. And again, may also, animals can test positive and then with negative, excuse me, and then with hours test positive because they just haven't started shedding the virus yet. So it's very important to reserve that for when they are symptomatic. For FIV and FELV testing, FALV and FIV positivity in cats only occurs in 2 to 5% of cats in the United States. It takes several weeks for either one of the viruses to appear from time of exposure to actually be detectable on a test. And testing a cat when it arrives at the shelter is not an accurate way to determine if the cat is infected. So what we do is if they are symptomatic, we will test. However, we do recommend that every adopter have a conversation and a relationship with their family veterinarian and have their newly adopted pet evaluated for the risk of FIV or FELV, as well as get established on an overall wellness plan for their cat as soon as possible, or their dog for other health vaccines and a wellness check following adoption. We do offer parvo and FELV testing for $20 to potential adopters that would like to know the status of the dog or a cat prior to adoption. However, these tests may or may not show, as previously discussed, that at the time testing for parvo or FELV, it's really dependent of whether or not they're shedding the virus at the time. And notably, and again, this is a best practice across animal shelters and again, across the greater Puget Sound. There have been some questions about the cat remains that were found a few weeks ago and whether or not this was a continuation of the mutilation cases deemed the cat killer. And we do understand the concerns of the community, which is why we had a licensed veterinarian evaluate the body and do a complete postmortem examination. And due to their findings, it was suggested that the most likely cause of death was by animal. So given the professional opinion of this licensed veterinarian, we are not pursuing an additional investigation of this incident. We will remain vigilant and treat every case as an individual and assess when cases arise, if they continue to arise. And finally, well, not, I shouldn't say finally, and Diamond's ashes. So we did perform a review of the records and retention that was established for evidentiary protocol and policies. And upon this review, we were able to determine that the ashes could be released to Diamond's owners, and we coordinated it as such. So now Diamond is at rest with her owners at home. Attending JASCOM meetings, as you all know here, JASCOM meetings are public meetings and anybody is welcome to attend. We have information posted on local buildings as well as in the Olympian. And they're also published on both the Joint Animal Services website and the City of Lacey's website. There was some concerns over our Facebook policy. So Joint Animal Services and the City of Lacey do maintain the right to block Facebook users who violate commenting policies, which you can find on each page. And among both pages, prohibit uncivil comments or personal attacks of any kind, including defamatory, libelous, combative, offensive, disparaging, demeaning, or threatening materials related to any person or group. Are there any questions?
I don't see any.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for reading that out. It was, you know, it's a good summary too for us to be reminded of some of these things. So thank you, Sarah. So let's move on to the JASCOM strategic plan.
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second so I can share the draft that was sent to you. Can everybody see okay?
Yeah.
So I wanted to go over the draft strategic plan. So as promised, I owed JASCOM from our strategic planning retreat. I took the notes given to us by Diane from the retreat and combined everything into what we felt. And this was done also with staff. So this was done with not just myself, but with Andrew and Heather and our newly appointed field supervisor, Rachel. So after reviewing all the notes and discussing what JASCOM's hopes were and strategic planning and the ideas that we created for our goals, this is the rough draft that we came up with. So goal 1 is to become a sustainable organization with the capacity to meet the needs of our community. So strategies for this goal consist of conducting a feasibility study to assess the current building's capacity and to provide the best care for Thurston County animals. Conduct a governance study to assess the intergovernmental agreement and current governance structure. Conduct a study to assess funding sources, revenue, and community's capacity for giving. And then perform a market and branding analysis implementing recommendations. So some of the key benchmarks for these, as these are studies that data will need to be analyzed, what I have for our benchmarks here is set to report out of what findings and recommendations are from each of these studies. So going through, for example, 2022 to 2023, goodness, I got a little too happy in there, my apologies. Present findings and recommendations from the feasibility study to JASCOM. So we did a 2022 to 2023 because the process of putting forth the RFP, soliciting for those proposals, settling on a consultant, and then doing the work could potentially take all of 2022, and we may not be able to report out on findings until the following year. And so I want to give us a little leeway for how long some of the studies can take for reporting out as some of the benchmarks for success. Questions before we move on?
Doug, do I see you?
Yeah, just a second. I didn't know if I was on mute or not. I didn't want to say anything. I like what you've done here, but I'm wondering about the order in which these benchmarks are reached. I'm wondering if the governance study might not be the first thing we should look at prior to looking at what we need for the shelter. Just a thought here. I'm not saying it hasn't baked in fully, but that's just a thought that went through my head as I was looking through these four steps, excuse me.
I can see either way on that, Doug. Can you expound on that a little? Because I can also see the feasibility study being important to,
Well, if we're going to change our way of governing, if we're going to become a 501c3, or we're going to be stay under the control we have now and do something different. If we're going to look at governance differently, I would think the ultimate operations of the shelter could be different. And we may need to, I would hate to have a governance set up that eliminates us from possibly doing something that we could actually build into a new facility because we set up the governance in a certain way. Is kind of my thought process. I like to see things get under control. You know, they're being managed properly before we get too crazy doing other things. And I think setting that governance might be the way of getting things under control. That's I'm not going to fall down on my sword fighting over this order, but it just seemed a little bit out of order to me.
That's excellent.
Actually, yeah. I appreciate that, Doug. That is actually, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's really excellent. Can I propose a compromise? Because part of the feasibility study is ongoing care of animals and for the county. So that's something that needs to, in my opinion, go on now, but I also agree with you. Is there any way, Sarah, is that too big of a piece to chew off to try to potentially get a conversation in 2022 about how we're going to go about looking at governance so that we can start that process? Would that make you
No.
happier, Doug?
We could do both simultaneously, potentially.
Is that better, Doug?
Sure. it's part way. So as I said, I'm not going to fall on a sword. So, you know, even if you don't change it, I'm not going to get crazy about it and go stomping out of the virtual meeting. But I wanted to bring it up just as just something for the group to think about.
Nope, that's really good food for thought. And that might be
It's
something
excellent.
that we can manage to do for sure. And some of this might honestly depend on availability, on what ends up happening first. For example, Animal Arts, the architecture firm that designs veterinary clinics as well as shelters, is backed up for over the next year. So could potentially be a matter of who is available first as well.
That's true.
So
And you
we
bringing
could-
this up, Doug, may make it, if we can't get a feasibility study done, we now know what the next most important or equally important.
Yep, so that can all play a part in that, and I can certainly change that key benchmark for it to be sooner, and then I can report back to Jazcom next year when we implement both of these to see, you know, where we end up landing on both as far as funding.
That works for me.
Moving forward, goal 2 would be to expand and improve animal care and programming to support our community's pets and people. Strategies would include continue to implement and increase medical care for shelter animals, review, identify, and recommend changes to local ordinances that impede or limit life-saving programs and services within Thurston County, create training and development opportunities for staff focusing on our vulnerable animal populations, both within the shelter and in the community, evaluate current and future staffing needs. Key benchmarks to this would be to perform 10% of spay-neuter surgeries on site the first year, increasing over the next 5 years by 5 to 10% year over year. Providing 15 to 20% of medical treatment and procedures on site by year 4. Increase save rate by 5 to 10% for vulnerable populations such as feral cats by year 2. Establish baselines for behavioral outcomes in first year, increasing in positive outcomes for animals with behavioral needs in ensuing years. So this was done because we talked about how the need for training for staff in behavioral animals. Seeing as how we need to identify that baseline first because COVID has thrown everything out the window. So we are only seeing behavior animals coming in for the most part. And so we need to establish our baseline this year in order to identify what our benchmarks need to be for saving those animals for ensuing years. So that's why that is phrased this way. Questions or concerns on this goal, suggestions, feedback?
Well, jump in again. I know you've got some nice benchmarks, but you don't seem to have any benchmarks on the training and the staffing needs. Your benchmarks are all pointed out towards the medical care, and you don't even have anything on the local ordinances. Just wondering if you're gonna put benchmarks for those as well.
I can.
A goal,
So
a goal without a schedule is a hope.
True, but what What I will say is the reason why the benchmarks are animals is because the training that we are providing will enable that to happen. Because if we don't provide the training, or if we don't provide the change in ordinances, both the increase the save rate for feral cats as well as the behavioral animals won't happen. So the training as well as the review of ordinances is what actually allows those benchmarks to take place.
Well, isn't there a benchmark to show that you've completed the ordinance review? Isn't there a benchmark to show you've accomplished the training?
I can certainly add one.
That's just what I'm trying to get at, is get some sort of schedule put together here for it.
Sure.
Identify that it's not, you know, if it doesn't have a due date, it's going to go to the bottom of the priority list.
Fair.
And I think these things need due dates so that they stay priorities.
What I will also tell you is there is a handy dandy spreadsheet that you guys will not see that is an internal document for other more in the weeds benchmarks that you guys don't necessarily need to really get that in the weeds about. But I can certainly add some higher level benchmarks in regards to training as well as the municipal codes.
That's not a bad idea, just to put it in, just so I, agree with Doug on that, just so that we know that we've crossed that benchmark line and that we have completed it. It's not a bad thing. High level.
Okay, I made notes. And finally, our third goal, which is increase accessibility, inclusivity, and enhance community involvement. So some of those strategies will include develop more collaborations by leveraging our reputation and working with Thurston County entities, stakeholders, nonprofit organizations, and businesses. We will evaluate language and DEI access of all materials, including brochures, handouts, websites, forms, online, etc. Partner with Thurston County entities to promote joint animal services through the marketing and communications teams. So some of our key benchmarks in this will be to reintroduce humane education opportunities and outreach events in the first year, increase language access to website by the end of the first year, increase language and DEI access to other materials by end of year 2, perform annual meeting with each jurisdictions to provide updates on animal services, and partner with jurisdictions to increase access to information out to Thurston County constituents.
I like that you're going to do the language by the end of the first year. I appreciate that.
Any other feedback, Doug?
She's waiting, Doug.
I like this one. No comments on this one. I thought I'd be nice to you, the third one.
Aw, thanks. Any other questions or feedback about the draft document for our 5-year strategic plan?
No, this is good. I like the way you put it together.
I like the 3 goals. I think they're valid goals. I think they're goals we need to meet. I think your strategies are good to get there. Just add a little quibble over scheduling and essentially scheduling and management. So way to go.
And I hear you, Doug, and I will accommodate those. And you will see an updated strategic plan next meeting for everybody to vote on.
Thank you.
I'm an engineering project manager. I need schedules.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was next meeting, Sarah, for the vote on that.
Yep, it'll be next meeting once I've implemented and you guys have a final document.
Thank you for all the work you did.
Of course, it was my pleasure. If you guys would like me to forward the notes and the swap, I can do so from Diane as well.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't mind just keeping a copy in my folder for Jazcom on my computer. That would be great.
Okay,
Okay, we're moving on to the recruitment recommendation.
yep. Can you guys see this okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So again, if you guys recall last meeting, we had a discussion about the preference for recruitment for 2 of our open positions that are appointed by the JASCOM Commission. So we do need to fill the one that's a member of a licensed veterinarian residing or practicing in Thurston County, which is currently not filled. The other one is the optional member that we can, so it's not mandatory, but we can select a nonprofit organization based in Thurston County with a shared animal welfare priorities. So again, this nonprofit and their representative would be selected by members of JASCOM. Our recommendations that we are making is that we solicit for candidates for the veterinarian position with the Washington Veterinary Medical Association and our local veterinary hospitals for candidates that are residing or practicing within Thurston County. Those candidates would be required to write a letter of interest, provide their CV or resume, and 3 veterinary references. Staff would collect and review these candidates and make recommendations of the top 2 to JASCOM for review. Per JASCOM's request, JASCOM would then interview these 2 candidates along with a veterinary consultant to join us besides our lovely chair, who is also a veterinarian, to interview the top 2 candidates for us to vote and appoint a new veterinary member. Now, the question was posed that is there a group of veterinarians in the South Sound community that can just make the appointment? And I did talk with Lisa about this, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said no, there is not currently a group that could make that appointment.
No.
So I would suggest that we solicit for that position. And a lot of the ways that City of Olympia and City of Lacey have solicited for other commission members and staff, we can certainly do the initial review. 17 years of working in a shelter. Both myself, Heather, and Andrew have had experiences working with veterinarians, managing clinics. And so we can make some initial determinations before we pose to the board. And I know Lisa and myself also know veterinarians that could sit as our consultant as an outside perspective to make the recommendation as well when we get to that point. What are everybody's thoughts on that?
How did we previously get a veterinarian on the commission?
That's a great.
I may be the only person. I may be the only person around here who experienced a different veterinarian.
Yep.
And all of a sudden there was a new veterinarian there. So I think it was probably she's been there since the original general manager was running things.
Yep.
I think she changed. She found somebody and brought her on board. I think that's how Virginia got selected. So so this sounds like a good way of going about doing it. We don't have a history, you know, we don't have a prerequisite or something back in the background to tell us we should do it this way. So creating a new way seems good. I don't have any problem with this way.
Excellent. I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to establish some ways that we recruit for these types of positions, since we could not find any historical background on how Dr. Ripka or previous veterinarians were appointed. For the Thurston County nonprofit, again, it would follow a similar pattern, except for we would not have a veterinary consultant. So in this case, we would solicit and recruit candidates from local nonprofits with a shared animal interest, require applicants to provide a letter of interest, CV or resume, 3 professional nonprofit references, and then staff would collect and review candidates and recommend the top 2 for JASCOM review. And then JASCOM would interview. Oh, I didn't change veterinary candidates. My bad. See, I caught it before you, Doug. The top 2 nonprofit candidates to make that vote and appointment.
Cutting and
And
pasting.
again, this is optional. So this can be something that we choose to do this year, next year. It's not a mandatory outline seat. It literally outlines in the IGA that this position is optional when JASCOM feels it's important to appoint a position.
I don't remember, maybe I missed it, but I remember us actually voting on this Thurston County nonprofit seat on JASCOM.
Oh,
Did I miss it?
we
Or did it
didn't.
get inserted into the IGA and having to get approved by the jurisdictions yet?
This was inserted into the IGA during our last retreat. So not this one, but the retreat before, where we did all the IGA work and had 2 sessions moving through and making edits and changes. And that was a request by JASCOM to have that edited and added into the IGA. And it has gone through the approval process through all the jurisdictions.
Okay, so then I have another question. Surprise. How do we, I think there needs to be some eligibility criteria established for local nonprofits with shared animal interest. That seems to be too broad a listing, because we've dealt with it at the Humane Society. We've had grants and we've dealt with people that are, they become a 501c3 and they have some animal interest, but it's one person. And it's not a very well organized organization. So I would like to see some sort of minimum criteria, time in place, size of the membership. I don't know what we could use, but I'd like to see if we can. I'm fine with bringing somebody on like that, but I want them to be somebody who's got some heft in the business, and not just somebody who thinks, "Oh, this will be fun."
Well,
I don't want you to have to fight through the "oh, this will be fun" people, and have a lot of people turn stuff in.
Doug, I hear you, but I'm assuming that the shelter staff will have access to who, not only through our region or county, but through other jurisdictions and other shelters contacts, who's legitimate and who's not. My assumption is that's where we would weed that out. And yeah, you're right. We don't want to make them do that, but wouldn't it be nice if we had 10 applicants? I see what you're saying, but I don't know what criteria, because 501c3, you're right, is not enough. Anyone can do that for $60 with the state. It doesn't make you a legitimate nonprofit. So if you can, I would recommend if you could come up with specific, bring it back to the JASCOM in October and let's think about it. But I kind of feel like if we're reviewing our governance in our strategic plan, and we may be talking about becoming a nonprofit ourselves, getting input from another part of our community that isn't covered by veterinarians in the jurisdictions might be a good idea in the next year, is to see if we can recruit
I don't
that.
have a problem with that, but if we don't have criteria, we can't say no to anybody.
Well, yeah, because we can vote to say no.
Because no,
If we don't like the, if we
we
don't,
can't turn them down up front because you're not we can't say you don't qualify because we
Well-
don't have anything to make them qualify. And so now anybody can submit something into the shelter and say, and so then the shelter has to take time
Well,
looking at that.
then please
dealing
bring
with that.
some criteria for us to discuss in October. But I would humbly disagree. The JASCOM commission can actually vote and say, no, neither one of these candidates are adequate.
And then then they'll come to the meetings and complain and write the
Well,
things on Facebook and
But
complain about
well,
how terrible
Doug,
we are. And
Doug, that's fine.
Sarah's gonna have to answer those questions again.
Okay, come to the October meeting with criteria that if you feel this would be important, bring criteria to us in October, and let's go forward on that one.
Lisa, we have both Shannon and Cynthia have their hands raised. for
Oh,
comment.
I can't see them with the screen share.
That's okay.
Okay, Cynthia, please. You muted.
First of all, I want to make sure that, because I am now back, Malcolm, do you want to continue until, I assume this goes till 7, or do you need to move off and me take over? And I'm just,
You can take over. I screenshotted everything that was on the screen to see, and I have a folder ready to share with you. So.
okay, so I can go ahead and stay then. Okay, thank you very, very much for helping this time. Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
Shannon.
Deputy Mayor, were you finished?
Yes.
Great. I was just going to second what Chair partially said, that this is a position that is appointed by the commission, and the commission could choose not to appoint someone.
But Doug, I would welcome if you have criteria that we could use. So bring it back to us in October. Is that it, Sarah, on this particular?
It is.
Okay. If I remember the agenda item. Oh, wait, Cynthia, go ahead.
Want to add to that, well, it would be great if we got 10 plus applicants. I suspect we'll be lucky to get 1 or 2, so I don't think this is a big deal.
Excellent. Sarah, do you want to go through your director's report for us?
I sure do, but don't worry, I will make my director's report quick for everybody. There we go. So to give everybody a brief update on our medical and surgical suite, plumbing and electrical have been fully connected. So we are operational in that sense. We've also had phone lines and internet attached. So it is a functioning building at this point. Next up, we are working on purchasing all the equipment to go in. There is a slight hold on purchasing the equipment at this moment, because that will tie in to my plumbing update in just coming up now. So the plumbing update is that we got the plumbers into the building. So from a historical reference, last meeting, Jazcom approved a $20,000 out of budget expenditure with our reserves to pay for the major plumbing issue that we have going on. Once we got plumbers in to look at the actual plumbing problem, it increased for the inside to $40,000. There is also the addition of the plumbing itself is not graded properly to the street, which is part of the problem of why we keep having these plumbing issues. And we are looking at an additional $40,000 for a total of currently $70,000 to $80,000. With that, instead of doing the change order that we had hoped with the same construction company that was doing our electrical and plumbing for the building, we are going to have to go out to bid and do an RFP for that process to see who can come in for the plumbing. The recommendation that's being offered by the city is that we work on the immediate internal problem first this year for the $40,000 or whatever the bid comes in at, and then making some allowances in next year's budget to work on the external issue, which is looking at to be an additional $40+ thousand dollars to actually fix the grading out from the building to the sewer lines. So with that said, we are holding off putting any equipment in our medical building at the moment because we'll need to accommodate animals and staff in that building when the plumbing actually happens, because no animals can be in the building while that construction is taking place. And there are some days that the staff cannot be in the building either for safety as well as hazard and noise reasons. And so we will be using the medical building while that internal construction is going on. And once that is fixed, then we will have the equipment come in to the medical suite, but we will be using that as kind of a temporary base once an RFP has been awarded to a construction company for the plumbing. We may have to come back to you guys in October with the actual cost for an additional budget amendment to accommodate that emergency expenditure. Questions about the plumbing or the medical suite?
So that would be coming back to JASCOM with a potential additional 20,000 for this year.
Correct.
I don't know how the commission feels about it. Do you think in October we'll know what the additional amount for the internal work will be, or should we wait until we get the actual estimate?
Shannon has her hand raised.
Shannon.
Well, Commissioner Parsley, I was just going to recommend exactly what you just said there with waiting until we got the estimate so we know the exact amount to bring before you all for approval.
Fabulous. Gosh, you start one thing and man.
Yep. I mean, it's good to know. Shannon, do you have your hand raised again?
No, sorry, let me put it down.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it is a lot like you go looking for one thing and you find 10 more. So it is good to know, and we will move forward to fix the issue. But again, points back to whether or not the governance versus the feasibility study of the building go almost hand in hand. If we can manage to do both at the same time, that would be fantastic, but it also is going to depend on everybody's availability for that next year.
One last question, unless Cynthia, I saw you unmute. Do you have a question?
Actually, yes, I did. I was going to put my hand
Go
up.
for it.
So what I'm hearing is that, so it's 20 and then another 40, which is 60, and now another 40 again. So that's 80, 100. Are we talking 1,000? And then maybe some more, or am I getting it too many 40s in there?
Too many 40s. So we're looking at, we originally estimated the cost to be about 20,000.
Right.
And then the plumbers got in and tacked on another 20. So we're looking at an estimated amount of around $40,000.
Okay.
For internal. Then looking at the external, you're looking at additional funding. So we could be, for a grand total, if you combine all the repairs, you're looking at what they originally put in at, which sent us to the RFP, was a $70,000 fix. So the recommendation from the city was to do the internal fix first,
Right.
see how much that helps the issue, and then plan to do the second one early next year and
Okay.
account for that in the budget. So we would split it into two sections.
So that's the plumbing. Is there any other potential big expense going in, like electrical or like flooring and roofing or whatever else?
Well, that is to include, at least with the plumbing, all the flooring, like all the fixes, you know, once we get there. But this is all the repairs that we know of for now.
No. Okay.
It is an older building. It was an old building when we moved into 96. I believe this building was built in the 60s or 70s. So we are definitely looking at probably some major repairs, which is one of the reasons for the feasibility studies. They can also kind of identify where our failing systems are within the building as
And
well.
I assume it would be additional updates to the code, building code kind of things too. When you do something, you have to bring it up to the level of it is what it is today. Okay.
Correct. And
And-
that is why the grading from the building to the street got added, because it was in looking at what we had to do for the internal plumbing that highlighted that additional issue. So
Okay. Thank you.
And what you didn't hear because you were having to attend the other meeting was one of our strategic plans, our goals had in there getting a consultant to do a building assessment.
Oh,
And
good.
so that's why we keep making comments, but Doug so wisely also mentioned that we had talked about how we're gonna, is there a potential change in governance? And that probably needs to be done simultaneously with the building of feasibility, or at least that whole process begun and not put off. So that's what that is referring to. Sarah, one last thing on this, unless Doug has something. You said that we'd be using the external building to shelter the animals and potentially the staff. How many days are we talking about? Because that could limit shelter capacity, I'm assuming.
yes, we are hoping that for staffing, it's just going to be the initial week when they're doing the digging. For the animals, and it's very specific animals, it's the treatment area and the isolation ward for the cats, and potentially the feral cats because they're adjacent. That could be for the feral cats are during that initial week, but treatment and isolation will be the extent of the plumbing issue until it gets fixed, because it runs right through where they're at and they can't be in the building while that happens. And we will also be making additional accommodations to move some of the other animals during that time frame. We will part of the process will be to give us enough time that we can ask for emergency fosters, both volunteers as well as our fosters that we already have, to take in the animals for a few weeks, at least, you know, the minimum the week that they're tearing the floors open, so that they're not in there for that noise and the stress of that construction process.
I think Shannon has her hand up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just going to comment, as far as the days, we can certainly provide Jazcom with a better understanding of the days once we have a bid. In addition to that, I know it was previously mentioned that returning to Jazcom in October with a bid, it's more likely that would be in the November, December timeframe.
Thank you. And thank you, Cynthia, for seeing that. I haven't put up the participant little screen, so I'm not paying attention. Sorry, Shannon. Okay. This is kind of bringing into sharp relief one of our goals here. Anything else, Sarah, for this director's report?
Yes, so I did want to mention we have some good news. We received a micro grant from Best Friends Animal Society. And I bring this up not just because I report to you whenever we get a grant, but it just so happens it aligns strategically with our 5-year plan. So we discussed the need for training as well as behavior programming internally for dogs and some of the cats for what we are seeing. And so Best Friends actually awarded us $5,000 to help internally build those structures needed. So it is to use on our, what we see fit to help with staff training, any equipment or supplies, to pay for behavior or training consultations for fosters, adopters, as well as training for staff. And so that was really exciting that we have that. And so we'll have a year to complete that grant from starting next month. And then just to keep everybody in the loop, we are working on the budget and assessment, and I should have an update for everybody this week, and I will be emailing out your assessments individually for your jurisdictions.
Okay.
Quick question.
Mhm.
On the micro grant, you said structures for training. That didn't make sense to me. What do you mean?
Internal structures.
Oh,
So
internal,
setting-
not physical structures. Okay, sorry.
No. It would be helping train the staff. If there was any additional equipment that we needed to be successful, if we had to bring a consultant in to help train the staff in certain types of things like play groups, behavior enrichment, things like that, it would allow us to set up the internal structure needed to provide behavioral assessments, modification, as well as behavior enrichment for the animals in our care.
Thank you. I was thinking wood.
I was thinking of agility courses, but I knew that wasn't
Yeah.
it.
Look, you-
We do have some agility equipment in our one big yard for any of the dogs that find it interesting.
That's good.
That is my
Okay.
divorce report. Oh, and I have a happy tale. I'm sorry. I wanted to share this lovely happy tale. One of our fosters, who is really amazing, ended up keeping 2 of her fosters over the winter, and they are doing quite well, Tiny and Snow, and they're quite adventurous, and they're known on the lake because they come out on their harness and leash, and they paddleboard, they canoe, they go riding in a sled. And I just wanted to share these great pictures because they shared them with us, and I love them so much. So just a wonderful happy tale to share with you guys of another successful adoption.
It is great. Hey.
Good. That's awesome to get a cat out in the water. Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay. Anything for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, everybody. It was a good meeting. We'll see you in October. And thank you, Sarah, for getting the budget and assessment out. Then I can face my city manager this week. That's good because we're coming up to budget season. Sarah, do you have any comments for Carolina, Commissioner?
You didn't ask me to provide any comments, but I've taken a lot of notes, so I'll be reporting back about everything that we discussed here. Thanks so much.
Okay. Doug, do you have anything?
Good, thank you. Probably tired
Hey,
of hearing me.
Shannon, it's time to go and back on vacation.
Looking forward
Okay.
to it.
Good, fantastic. Okay, everybody, you guys be safe, and we'll see you in October.
Bye-bye.
Bye.